Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about Gamera Rebirth and what I think about the show. Gamera Rebirth has been out for a while, but I kind of wanted to wait before talking about it because, I wanted to let my thoughts just, really sink in. Because when I first saw Gamera Rebirth, I loved it. I was in this, honeymoon phase with the show. I was very happy with it, but, I also just didn't want to, just blindly praise it. I guess I just kind of wanted to sit down and just sort of reflect on how I felt about Gamera Rebirth. So that's why I waited, you know. And well, also you guys, a good chunk of you guys wanted me to talk about Gamera Rebirth. So yeah, and I don't mind talking about it. In fact, I do want to talk about it. So yeah, that's that's why I'm here. But I digress. So yeah, that's why it took me so long to talk about Gamera Rebirth, or why I'm just getting into it now. Just want to just give a quick spoiler warning. This video obviously will contain spoilers. This video is mostly for, people who have seen Gamera Rebirth. So if you have seen Gamera Rebirth, you can stay. If you have not seen Gamera Rebirth and you don't want yourself to be spoiled, then click off this video. Or if you haven't seen it or just don't really care and just want to hear me talk about the show, then go right ahead. Either way, I don't care what you do. I just want to give a quick spoiler warning. So yeah, just want to be courteous to the people who haven't seen it, but I digress. So yeah, so Gamera, he finally made his grand return. Godzilla. He was on hiatus from 2004 after Godzilla Final Wars, and he didn't come back until 2014 with, well, Godzilla 2014. Ultraman. Actually, I don't think Ultraman went on hiatus during this period. I'm pretty sure Ultraman was still thriving pretty decently. I could be wrong, but still, Ultraman, I think, was doing pretty solid. And then there was Gamera. Gamera's hiatus started in 2006, starting after the release of Gamera the Brave, which I think is a very good movie. I think was a nice send-off to the Gamera series, for that point. And 17 years later, well, we still don't have a proper Gamera movie, but we do have a Netflix exclusive Gamera anime, which it's something. It is something. It's a nice start. We have gotten other things within that time frame. We got this really cool short film, and we got some pretty cool figures and whatnot. But still, for the most part, we haven't been getting a lot of Gamera stuff. So Gamera Rebirth, yeah, it's something. It might not be a movie, but it's actually something. So, what do I think about Gamera Rebirth? Well, let's talk about that. Starting with the characters, in the first episode of the show, we follow a trio of friends, which consists of Boko, Joe, and Junichi. Boko, who's the main character, he's the one who has the connection with Gamera, similar to Asagi from the Heisei Gamera trilogy, and I like him. He's not the strongest character in the show, in my opinion, but he's still a likable protagonist. I do like him. The other person, Joe, I really like Joe. Joe is my favorite character in the show. Joe show. I'll stop. Sorry. But yeah, I do really like Joe. He's like the older brother of the friend group. Like Boko, he's the quieter one in the friend group. Who kind of he starts off kind of not being able to stick up for himself, and then later he starts to become more of a stronger character. And I think Joe, I think is really really good character. Again, his relationship with Junichi and Boko, I think work really nicely. We'll talk about Junichi in a second, but yeah, Joe, I really like Joe. He helps everyone else grow and tells them hey, this isn't a good idea, or hey, we should do this, and a responsible way. He does really care for Boko and Junichi, and I do really like Joe in the show. There I go again. I swear I didn't mean it. But yeah. Speaking of which, Junichi, she is the nerdy, awkward friend in the group. And I do like her, again, a little one-dimensional. I think Boko and even Joe, to an extent, I feel are a little one-dimensional. I still think they're good characters, but I don't know, I feel they could have been a little stronger. And Junichi, again, is very one-dimensional. She's just the nerdy girl character. There was one, weird moment in the show where, everyone thought, she was a guy, and then, in episode 3, they reveal, oh, she's a girl. And I don't. I thought that was kind of weird. They could have done without that, but I digress. Junichi, I still think is a. I still like her, but I don't know. Like again, like the character, like the trio themselves, like individually, they're not super strong, but I think they work really well off each other. Joe, like they clearly like look out for each other. And that's like really well portrayed, and even gives off like some really good like Showa era Gamera vibes, and I think that is I think they did that very well. There's Brody. Brody, he's the bully character in the show who eventually joins the friend group because of all the monsters appearing and just destroying everything. Brody might be my least favorite character. Because he was just like the generic bully who steals like the main characters, like in the show they like want to buy a radio and they end up buying that radio, and Brody and his like friend group comes along and just steals it from him. Yeah, we're like it's like okay, but then like episode like 2, he's all of a sudden just like, hey guys, like I'm really cool, I'm your friend now, and it just feels very abrupt. We also don't see any of Brody's friends after that. Like we see him in the first episode, and then after that it's just they're just kind of gone. So yeah, Brody, I think they could have done a little bit more with him, but still, he's not a horrible character. I just think they could have done a little. I wish they worked on him a little more. We have Emiko. She is a scientist in the show who recruits the main trio as well as Brody to investigate the monsters and why they're attacking, because they were involved with the attack from Gyaos and Gamera, or not attack from Gamera, but like being caught in the middle of like the fight between Gamera and Gyaos. So yeah, again, I don't really care for her that much. Like she, again, not a bad character, but she's very just like I don't know, she just doesn't really have much of a personality. There was a plot twist towards the end of the show where she turns out to be evil, and her whole plan was to like sacrifice the children to Virus. But yeah, I don't know. She was just kind of there. I wasn't really too much of a big fan of her. So yeah, Emiko, yeah, don't really have a whole lot to say about her. Then we have Tazaki, who is Emiko's lab partner in the show. That's all I have for notes. That's pretty much like, well, towards the end, he helps like the kids like escape and like helps them out. But yeah, like for the most part, he's very like he's just kind of there. He doesn't really do anything. So yeah, Tazaki, not my favorite character. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the characters. There aren't really like we like there are a bunch of side characters, but we only really follow these 6. And again, I think like the main trio, like Boko, Joe, and Junichi, I think they work really well. Brody, like I don't know, I wish they worked on him more. And Emiko and Tazaki, yeah, not the biggest fan. Not like a negative, not the biggest fan, but just kind of like I don't know, I didn't really care for him. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the characters. Post-recording Zack here. One thing that I forgot to point out that I think is really funny. The first episode of the show, uh, all of the kids are like cursing like truckers, and I believe this is the first time the word fuck has been dropped in a Gamera related project, which I think is really funny. So, yeah. Now, we'll talk about the soundtrack. And the soundtrack of the show, I think was good. I think it did the job nicely. It doesn't stick out like any of the Heisei Gameras, like any of their like those movie soundtracks, but still, it does get the job done nicely. The one track I remember specifically was Anger, probably because they played that track a lot, but still, that was one that I think got stuck in my head. Also, towards the end of the show, they actually played a very nice cover of the Gamera March, which actually made me very happy. I'll be honest, I unironically love the Gamera March, so the fact that they included that there, I thought was really cool. So yeah, the soundtrack, not incredible, but for what it is, I think it gets the job done nicely. The writing, for the most part, was solid. There were some moments that I didn't really care for. Like I said, in episode 3, there was like this weird thing that came out of nowhere where I guess Brody thought that Junichi was a boy, and later on it's revealed that she was a girl. I thought that was kind of weird. I wasn't really a big fan of that. There was also some minor fan service with Emiko. There were some moments that I feel like didn't need to be there. Plus, I'll just be honest and say I've seen much better fan service, if I'm being honest. But yeah, like some weird stuff like that. But for the most part, I thought the writing was pretty solid. The serious moments I felt were, they felt natural, and like, the comedy that wasn't weird, I thought landed nicely. So yeah, the writing overall I think was pretty solid. The cinematography I think is great. I think there are a lot of like great shots that like give like a really nice like sense of scale between like the characters and the monsters. So yeah, that's one thing that the show does really nicely. There are also a lot of really nice set pieces here. I think like all the fight scenes involving Gamera and like all of, like the more like action, like more fast paced scenes with the human characters, I think were done nicely. The animation, I'll talk more about that in a second, was a little wonky at points, but for the most part, like the ideas there, I thought were very well done. The sound design I think is good. Some of the monsters I think sounded a little weird, specifically Jiger and Giron, but still, I think, yeah, overall the sound design I thought was okay. Now, I want to talk about some of my overall negatives with Gamera Rebirth. First of all, I just want to get this one little nitpick out of the way. I was not a big fan of Jiger. In the movie where Jiger debuted in, Gamera vs. Jiger, she had a lot of abilities. Like, she could fly, she could, like, shoot, like, these, like, little, like, toothpick things out of her horns or whatever. I know it's not weird, I promise you. But yeah, Jiger did a lot in like her original debut movie, but here she does nothing. She just kind of like walks around. She like I think she eats people at certain points, and yeah, she doesn't even impregnate Gamera anymore. She just kind of pokes him with her tail, and yeah, Jiger. I wish they did more with Jiger, or I even would have gone with Barugun. I think Barugun would have been a much cooler, pick instead of Jiger. But I digress. Now for like the bigger issues I have with Gamera Rebirth, like very big. Like these aren't like nitpicks. These are like actually like kind of deal breakers for me. For one, the animation. The animation in the show I think is not very good. I think I like the character designs and I like the monster designs, but like especially the humans, I don't think they're translated very well in like 3D. Like this CGI look does not look good at all. Um it's very choppy. And even like Gamera's like movements, like obviously like Gamera is a turtle, right? Turtles can't like they can't like crunch their abs or anything like that. They're just kind of like stuck like that. And like every Gamera movie, right? Like the Showa era, the Heisei era, like they kind of played with this idea a little bit. There were points in the Showa era where Gamera was stuck on his back, and even in, like the Heisei trilogy, there were like certain moments where he was stuck on his back. Even like Gamera the Brave, there's a little bit of that, but like here, and they do play with that a little bit, but like they don't fully commit. Like there are moments where Gamera like he moves in a way that like a turtle shouldn't. I know like he's a giant fire breathing turtle that can fly. I know like obviously that's not going to be like super realistic, but like again, I wish they just sort of like just kept that like okay, he's a turtle, he can't crunch his waist or anything like that. I wish they just played with that more, but instead when he does, it just looks very weird in my opinion. So yeah, the animation I thought was not very good. Another thing that I really did not like about the show was the pacing. Uh, the episode layout also was just not very good. Like there were 6 episodes, and each episode was like 40 minutes long. I think if it was like 12 episodes, like 12 22-minute episodes, and they just like better, just like paced it a little better, I think it would have been nice. Because like the story doesn't really kick off until like the second to last episode, which is very unfortunate. So yeah, the pacing I thought was very bad here. So yeah, like Jiger, like what they did with Jiger, like that was like a nitpick, and like usually like when I reviewed Shin Ultraman, like there's always like some like nitpicky things that I talk about, but no, like the horrible pacing and like the very poor animation, I think like those are very big issues for me. So yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the negatives. Now, I want to talk about my overall positives with the show because I do have a good amount of things to say that are indeed positive. Just like overall, that doesn't have to do with like the soundtrack or the characters or anything like that. Uh, well, ironically, I say that because like one of the first things on my notes here, the main trio, so like Boko, Joe, and Jinichi, again, like they're not the strongest characters in like the history of Gamera like films and whatnot, but still, like they work off of each other very nicely, and they do have like a very wholesome relationship, and I do really like that. Again, I talked about that towards the beginning, but still, I do really like that in that trio. A lot of the redesigns for like all the monsters I think look really cool. I really like Gamera's new design. I don't think it's as good as the Heisei designs, like the Heisei designs for Gamera, like especially his design in Gamera 2 as well as Gamera 3. Like those two are my favorite Gamera designs. I don't think like his rebirth design goes as hard as those designs, but still, I do really like his new design. It really gives off like a legendary Godzilla sort of feel, and I do really like Gamera's like design here. And all the other monsters too. Jiger, again, I'm not a big fan of Jiger. Even her design, I'm not the biggest fan of. But like everyone else, I think looks great. I really like Gyaos. I think Ziegler looks good. I really like Euron, and even Virus. Like Gamera versus Virus is like not my favorite Gamera movie, and also Virus I just think is a very lame monster. But here they actually made Virus like actually kind of scary, and I do really like what they did here. So yeah, the new updated designs for all the monsters I think look very good. Uh, there are a lot of references to like past Gamera movies in this show, which I think is really cool. But they don't feel forced, which is like that's the cool part. And like a lot of like reference heavy like shows or movies, like they always feel forced. Like especially with like Jurassic World or like Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, it's like, whoa, remember the night vision goggles? Whoa, remember the Ford Explorer? It's like there's none of that in Gamera Rebirth. Like the references that are here, like they're done tastefully. They don't feel like forced in any way, shape, or form. They're just kind of there. You know, Gamera's banishing fist from Gamera 3 actually comes back here. I was not expecting that, but like Gamera Gamera did that, and I thought that was really cool. And even like the ending of the show where there, like Gamera, like, well, spoiler alert. I gave the spoiler warning, but like Gamera dies towards the end, and like he's reborn as like a very small like baby Gamera, which is like a nice little nod to Gamera the Brave, but also, come on, baby Gam. I'm sorry. I hate like marketable like baby baby Yoda. I hate that. But baby Gamera, I'm not gonna lie. I like that guy. I like him a lot, but I digress. But yeah, no, like plenty of references to like past like Gamera movies, but they don't feel forced. Like they feel natural, and if like you miss them, like it's not like an integral part of like the story or anything like that. So yeah, a lot of references that don't feel forced, and I think that's great. And again, the ending I think was very well done as well. So towards the beginning of the show, Boko or Joe is trying to teach Boko how to ride a bike, which is something that he's struggling with. And towards the end of the show, Joe actually sacrifices himself to save Junichi, Brody, and Boko, as well as the business guy. I forgot his name off the top of my head. But yeah, no, like Joe sacrifices his life to rescue those guys, and the end of the show, there's a nice little character arc. Like Boko learns how to ride a bike, and it's just very sweet. I do like that. Very like it's like simple, but like it's very nice, and I do like that a lot. So yeah, like for all the negatives I have, there are some things that I do enjoy about Gamera Rebirth. So in conclusion, Gamera Rebirth, when I first viewed it, I thought it was great. I thought it was like an 8 out of 10. I thought it was great, but I thought about it for a little bit, and the animation I think is pretty rough. The pacing is, that could have been worked on a lot more, but besides that, I think Gamera Rebirth is okay. You know, It's not great like the Heisei Gamera trilogy, but it's also not horrible like Gamera Super Monster. Like, it's a good time, it's a good return to form, and yeah, I do like Gamera Rebirth. Despite its flaws, I think Gamera Rebirth is an alright time, so I'm gonna give Gamera a 7 out of 10. Normally, I'd end the video here, but this is something that I think is important to talk about. Now, really quick, I just want to say I love Gamera, but I didn't grow up with Gamera, right? Like, growing up, I was exclusively a Godzilla kid, right? I didn't care for Gamera, I didn't care for Ultraman. If it wasn't Godzilla, I didn't care. Um, I grew out of that phase, actually fairly recently, admittedly. So in 2021, I started to check out the Gamera movies. I talked about this in my Shin Ultraman review, but still, like, I started to branch out, check out Gamera, and since then, I have grown to really love Gamera. Again, I didn't grow up with them the same way I grew up with Godzilla, but, I still really do care about Gamera. I spend sometimes an unhealthy amount of money on the figures, and yeah, overall, I love Gamera. I think Gamera is great. But unfortunately, I do want to talk about Gamera Rebirth's reception. So apparently, Kadokawa said that if Gamera Rebirth did well, then they'd do more with Gamera. We'd get, like live action, like television series, we'd get like movies, we'd get more with Gamera. So more than just the occasional like mobile game thing, or more than like, like a figure once in a while, like we'd be getting more Gamera stuff, and it would have been great. But unfortunately, from what I've heard, Gamera Rebirth is a flop. It didn't do super well, and if I'm being honest, the writing was kind of all over the walls. First of all, the marketing was pretty poor. I think they kind of sort of blew their load a little too early. They sort of like promoted it like in November. Like when they first revealed it, they had like billboards out and everything, and then just silence. And then we got the trailer, and then just kind of silence. Like, I don't think Gamera Rebirth was marketed very well. And this is also a Netflix exclusive anime. Like, when I first saw like the poster for Gamera Rebirth, I was ecstatic. Like, I was about to go to bed. I was really tired. Like, I was still like doing college stuff, so I was exhausted that day, ready to go to bed. And before I went to bed, I went on Instagram. I saw Gamera Rebirth. Gamera's coming back, and I was super excited. But there was a little part of me who saw the Netflix logo in the corner of the poster, and there was a little part of me that knew that, yeah, this is probably not going to do well. Like a Netflix exclusive, like this is going to be like a super low budget like series, and that's exactly what it was. Kadokawa, they cut a lot of corners with this show. Um, the intro in particular. Now, usually with, well, I was gonna say like anime intros, but even with like other intros of like other like shows that aren't anime, they usually like outsource them to like other animation studios so that the primary animation studio can work on the actual show. That's why the intro for, let's say, the original 80s Transformers looks different than the cartoon. Or that's why, like just throwing examples out there, like the animation for intros for certain shows look better than the actual show itself because, they were outsourced to another animation studio. With Gamera Rebirth, they just took clips from the show and just made like a little AMV. And it was like, I mean, it gets the job done, but it's still like, it gets you hyped for the show, but it doesn't reveal too much. But it's still one of those things where, like, again, like they cut corners there. They didn't outsource the intro for Gamera Rebirth. They just kind of, oh, we'll just edit some clips together and call it a day. So yeah, some cut corners there. And again, like they hired the animation studio the animation studio that worked on Gamera Rebirth was the same studio that worked on the Godzilla Monster Planet trilogy, which, to be fair, it's been a while since I've seen the first movie, and I haven't even touched the other two movies, but that trilogy of films, like, it doesn't have the best reputation as far as like quality goes. And yeah, the fact that they hired that team to do this, not because, oh, yeah, like this works perfectly. It's cuz it was the cheaper alternative. Kadokawa, they did the cheapest thing ever. They did the bare minimum with Gamera Rebirth, and it is very upsetting. Which leads to my next point. That point being Kadokawa's treatment of Gamera. Now, as I mentioned earlier, from what I've heard, Gamera Rebirth was a flop, so unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be seeing another hiatus for Gamera. For how long? We don't know. But I'd, I'd buckle up because it might be another 17 years, maybe even longer, but we'll just have to wait and see. We'll still get side stuff, we'll definitely still get figures and like, little stuff like that. But as far as like big projects like movies and whatnot, yeah, I think we might be in for another hiatus, which is very unfortunate. We live in a world where both Godzilla and Ultraman are like triumphant. Literally, like we just got Godzilla minus one, which was the first Godzilla movie to win an Oscar, which is insane. That has never happened before. And then, like months later, we got Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, which made a lot of money. So Godzilla's thriving very well, both in America and in Japan. And then there's Ultraman, who, even though Ultraman isn't doing as strong, here in the States, like in Japan, like, well, it's Ultraman. Like, he is a Japanese icon. And then there's Gamera, who I'm glad that we got Gamera Rebirth. Again, I think it's a nice return to form, but I still think that, you know, Kadokawa still cut a lot of corners with Gamera Rebirth, and it's very unfortunate, Again, despite not being, in the Gamera when I was a kid, like only just now watching the Gamera movies like a few years ago, like I still love Gamera. But even then, like, even I have to admit, like, this still kind of hurts. Like, I can't imagine how, like, the people who grew up with Gamera feel. Like, people growing up, like, people who are my age and, like, had that same experience with, like, Godzilla, but, like, Gamera as well. I can't imagine how they're feeling. Like, they're probably like, yeah, God, we're getting a lot of Godzilla content, but, like, where's Gamera? Oh, we got Gamera Rebirth, a very low budget anime series. Nice. So, yeah, Kadokawa, they have no desires to do anything big with Gamera. Like, they'll make, like, figures and, like, merch for Gamera based on, like, the Showa era or the Heisei era or even Gamera the Brave. And maybe a little bit of Gamera Rebirth, too. But, again, as far as, like, big, like, projects go, like, series or movies, like, they don't really care. They're more interested in just doing, anime, which, you know, I get it. That's like their main thing, but like again, like more of a push for Gamera would be really nice to see. So yeah, it is really unfortunate to see how Gamera is being treated by Kadokawa. I did hear though that the director of the Heisei Gamera trilogy, Shusuke Kaneko, I probably botched that name. If I did, I'm so sorry. Um, I did hear that he was in talks with trying to get a Gamera, like a new Gamera movie made, like after Rebirth. Like he did approach Kadokawa with like an idea for a Gamera movie, but they're already working on Gamera Rebirth at the time. But like after that, I think I remember hearing about something like, yeah, he wants like to do more with Gamera, which, you know, if that ends up happening, that would be great. And this whole rant that I'm, wasting a good chunk of the video on, that'll age poorly, and we will be getting plenty of Gamera content, and we'll all be happy, us Gamera fans. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. For right now, it seems a little unlikely, but anything can happen. So for now, I think as far as us Gamera fans go, I think the only thing left for us to do is just hope we get more stuff. So yeah. Anyway, Yeah, Gamera Rebirth still gets a 7 out of 10. That is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, Zack out.